Hello, my name is Phil. I'm going to show you how you can reload for a 545 by 39 using a lot of materials that you may already have on hand if you're a reloader. I'll go through a few things, techniques, why I reload, stuff that gets used, things to look out for, stuff like that. We'll start off with why reload for this round. Cost, mainly. It used to be less than 10 cents a round to shoot for AK-74. Now you're getting up in the 22, 23, 24, 25 cents a round. You're back up into, we'll say, 5.56 price range. Plenty of people reload for 5.56 and 2.23. So why not start reloading for the 5.45? And it seems like it should be a pretty easy caliber to reload for, but it ends up you got to work through a lot of problems and some issues, and we're gonna run through that. I'm gonna start fresh with 3 cases, and we'll run through the whole thing, the whole process. Again, if it's gonna cost you more to reload, not that there isn't a point in it. You might enjoy reloading. I enjoy reloading. If it cost me more to reload, then I probably wouldn't do it. I would just buy the ammo. So that's number 1, cost. 2, I enjoy reloading. I like being out here in the garage and just reloading. Probably just as much as shooting. I like the challenge of reloading. I think everybody that reloads is sort of a mad scientist and tries to experiment. Yeah, they're going to go through their books and see what their recommended charges are and stuff like that. But you're going to experiment. You're going to put more powder than what it says in the books. Don't lie. All right? You're a mad scientist. Another good reason why I would want to start reloading brass cases for this caliber is I know, and using regular, we'll say American primers, I know that I'm not going to have any corrosive ammunition running through my rifle. Not that that's a huge issue if you clean it, but I know with some of the Wolf and Tula stuff, they said some of that stuff did have corrosive primers. Who knows? I heard that there's a test you can see if the primers are corrosive. If you stick with regular, Winchester Federal, CCI, stuff like that, primers, you know that none of them are going to have corrosive properties to them. Another reason to reload for this caliber is if you ever needed to reload for it. Now you can go down the rabbit hole of situations where you may need to reload for this caliber. We're going to start off with the big issue for reloading. Now I'm going to assume that you have some experience in reloading, and some of these tools you already have. Nowadays, the new big thing is 350 Legend brass. It is definitely doable, and it's definitely getting a little bit cheaper. Right, the lowest I've seen is about 25 cents for a single piece of brass. If we're paying 25 cents for the brass, again, that goes back to cost. Yes, you may get a few firings out of it, and it'll bring the cost down. And it might not be a bad option. Whether you're using 350 Legend brass, or what I like to use is once fired Lake City 5.56 brass, and I'll tell you why once fired may be better than new brass, at least in my experimentations. So we'll jump right into it. I'm going to start off with clean, once fired Lake City brass. If you try new brass, Winchester brass, you're going to run into a problem when you're forming the brass. This brass, being once fired, is already, we'll say, hardened. It's already a little brittle, and that's going to help us out actually in the forming stages. When you're forming brand new brass, what can happen is when you're cutting the brass and forming the shoulder, down here at the bottom of the shoulder, it's going to bulge out because the brass is soft. We're going to avoid that with once fired Lake City 556 brass. I've already sprayed this with lube. When you're spraying it with your case lube, you can't put too much, you can't put too little. You got to put just the right amount, and that's going to be you experimenting with it. If you put too little or none, when running these through the sizing dies, you're going to wind up with scores on the brass, lines going all the way down the brass, scratches. If you put too much case lube, you're going to wind up with small folds in the case neck. I want to run you through the process. We have lubricated 556 cases. We're going to need to remove the primer crimp. There's several ways to do it. You can do it on, I have a Dillon Super Swage is one option, and I'll tell you why it might not be the best option. Or if you have a press mounted swager, or something like the RCBS station where just removes it sort of with like a chamfer tool. If you're using the Dillon Super Swage, in my experience, it does a great job of removing the primer crimp. However, being that that rod goes into the case, I found that sometimes it can push the bottom of the primer pocket further into the primer pocket. When you go to seat a primer, it's not going to seat at the correct depth. So if you're using a Dillon Super Swager, I'd recommend you get something like this also. This is a RCBS primer pocket uniformer, just this thing, attached to a cordless drill. After you swage the pocket, run this through there just a couple times, 2 or 3 times. You want to get the depth of the primer pocket to 12 thousandths, or 12 thousandths? 12 hundredths, sorry. 0.012 depth. You can check the depth of your primer pocket with a caliper. Point down, and I'm at 0.1195, 0.1190, close enough. What that's going to do is prevent slam fires. We'll get into that a little bit later. Now that we have the brass lubricated, we have the primer pocket swaged, and we have the primer pocket depth corrected. We're going to start trimming the brass. What I use now, I've done thousands. You gotta understand, I have a lot of experience with this. This is all once fired brass. I have plenty of bags of newly formed brass. I use automatic type stuff. I have a Dillon RT500 trimmer that's in a 300 blackout trim die. That trim die is adjusted so that I'm cutting just enough of the brass off, and sort of I start forming the shoulder with that. After that it goes into, after that it's going to leave a small ring of brass, and I'm going to show you this in a minute. A small ring of brass inside the case that needs to be removed with a chamfer deburring tool. I have one of these hooked up to this drill that is clamped to my bench, and that's going to go inside and remove some of the brass ring. It cleans up the case mouth and it gets it ready later on down the line for receiving the bullet. Goes back in the press. It goes to the second step. I have, we'll say, an intermediate die. This is a modified die. I actually forget what size die I put in here. I think it's like oh man, what did I put in there? I forget. The case, the neck is, I can't read what it says. The neck gets adjusted. Basically, it's at the halfway point between a 300 blackout neck, which is pretty wide, and a 545 neck. If you go right from the 300 blackout die, and that adjusts the neck pretty wide, to the 545 die, it's like too much for the brass to handle all at once, and you're going to ruin more pieces of brass than you're going to have successful. And I'll show you what the ruined pieces of brass looks like in a few moments. I usually have the trimmer hooked up to a vacuum. Since I'm only doing these 3 pieces, I'm not going to hook it up to a vacuum for sound, but I am going to have the drill running. That's a little loud in itself. I'm just going to run through these 3 pieces. Once that is formed there, then it's going to move to the final sizing die. I have an RCBS sizing die with the pin installed, the neck sizing pin installed. You can find these sets with the neck sizing pin and a decapping tool. They're a little bit tougher to find because, one, there is no boxer primed brass cases in the US. We'll say manufactured. It's only Berdan primed cases. So to have the decapping pin on there, if you try to run a steel case in there, you're going to break the decapping pin off. Some of them come with the decapping pin, some of them not. The one I have does not have the decapping pin installed, which it's not a problem either way. Let's see, is that enough talking yet? It's just about enough talking. Let's run through these 3 cases. I'm going to start drill. Since we're done with those 2, shut them off. You'll see this case. I'll take it out so you can see what it looks like. This case has already had It's already been trimmed. It's already been somewhat formed in the 300 blackout die and the intermediate sizing die. This case is ready to go into the final one. And I should have showed you this one first. This is what the case looks like coming out of the 300 blackout die. You'll see me, I removed a little bit of the brass that was inside there. There leaves a little ring of shaved brass in there. That chamfer tool removes that. Then it goes right back into the press. And ready for here. And this is what you're going to get. I'll clean it up a little bit. You get a nice 545 piece of brass. Now the reason, I'll show you what it looks like when you fail. These three, all good. No problems. I have a few pieces of brass down here. This is what it's going to look like when you screw up. Right here, this case mouth, once it was trimmed, the case mouth wasn't quite round all the way. Since it's once fired brass, there may be dents in the brass, and this particular one had sort of a flat part to it. When it went into the intermediate die, it ended up folding on itself, so there's a giant fold in the neck. This is another example of a type of fold. This is a small fold. This case is junk. If you fire this, you probably can get something like this is too big of a fold. You might get small folds, and you can fire them. What you'll end up doing is splitting the case neck right there. That's a couple example of bad ones. So we have our three cases. There is still a little bit of lubricant on the cases. Leave it on the cases. Since we're done with this setup, again, you're probably not going to be making 3 at a time. When I start making these, I usually make 3, 4, or 500 at a time. When you're first trimming them, you want to trim them. I think I wrote down some measurements here. You want to trim them to 1.540 inches. These measurements are in inches. That is shorter than the maximum SAMI length. When these go into the next dies, what you want is they sort of grow in the next series of dies, in the intermediate die and then the final sizing die. You want to get these as close to SAMI spec as possible, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. 1.555 is the maximum overall length for the case for the SAMI spec. So you can see we're only, what, 5 thousandths off. Very close, right? You want to get as close as you can to the SAMI spec maximum overall case length. That's going to be some experimentation on your end. What size you trim it to. I trim it to, when it goes into the 300 blackout die, it's going to 1.540, and then like I said, it sort of grows as it goes into the next dies. Here I'm putting in the press just a powder measure and the bullet seating die. That's all that is in this step, and we'll get to that in a moment. Inspect the brass, make sure there aren't any folds in it up in the neck. That's pretty much the only problem you're going to run into when you're making the brass. If there's a small fold in it, it's best just to get rid of it. It's just going to turn into a crack later on down the road. Now we're going to start getting into some of the components that we're going to use. We'll first talk about first step, primers. I use Winchester small rifle primers. One, that's what I have on hand. Remember, we're trying to use stuff that we have on hand. You can use CCI, you can use Federal, you can probably use Cellar and Bellet primers. Really anything that you feel comfortable with. So I'm using Winchester small rifle primers. The next big thing that we're going to talk about that'll drive you crazy, and if you just listen to this is going to save you a lot of aggravation. Powder. I really wanted to use Winchester 748 powder. I have a ton of that on hand. It's what's used in 223 cases, so these cases are very similar. So, in theory, you would think it would work pretty well. And it didn't. And it sort of drove me crazy. What I'm going for is, I want these things to be 100%. When I take these out to the range, I don't want any splits, any case splits. I don't want any slam fires. I don't want the neck splitting or the case splitting. I'm going to show you examples of all that. What do we have here? This is an example of the case just blowing up. This looks super dangerous. I've probably shot easily over 100 rounds that exploded just like this. And I say exploded, I didn't notice any difference when firing this round or any round that split versus a case that was completely fine. This looks super dangerous. It's really not. It's really not. This is determined by powder selection. I'll get into that in a second. We'll get into that right now. That Winchester 748 powder, like I said, it's used in 223 cases, which is usually used in, an AR type rifle. If you think about the gas system in an AR, the gas is right behind the bullet. The bullet's traveling down the barrel. As soon as the bullet gets past the gas block, that gas block is going to take some of those gases up into the gas tube. It's going to go way back down the gas tube and then hit your bolt carrier and your bolt carrier group and cycle the rifle. It's going to eject the round, put a new round in. An AK, which I'm assuming what most of you are going to be firing these rounds out of, works very similar, but not the same. You got to realize once the bullet's going down the barrel, once that bullet gets past the gas block, that little bit of gas is going to go into the gas block, and it's immediately pushing that bolt carrier back. So once that gas goes up, it's going to hit your the bolt carrier part of that gas rod that's in the gas tube of the AK. So the gas only has to travel, once it passes the gas block, the gas is only traveling upwards about, an inch or two, not even, pushing that rod back, which is attached to the bolt carrier, and it's slamming it back. The gas does not need to travel up and then way back in order for this rifle to cycle. that's how these happen. Winchester 748 is, we're going to say, it's a great powder for 223, but it is too slow of a powder for 545 by 39. What is happening is these are being developed, the gas is going right past the up into the gas block, pushing that bolt carrier back while this powder is still burning, while this case is still expanding. So now it's being, this case is being extracted slightly from the chamber while the gases are still expanding in here. It's not done full. All the gunpowder isn't burned yet. Pulling out, still expanding. Boom. Case split. Looks super dangerous. Like I said, there's no different feel. I didn't notice anything different when firing this until I went and picked up the cases. I'm like, man. And that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. It took me a while to figure out, what the heck is it? Is it the charge? I'm messing around with charge weights, messing around with different primers. Is the primer too hot? It ended up being that powder is just too slow for the AK. Winchester 748, too slow. So what other powders might you have on hand? Well, now that you see I have 300 blackout dye, sure, I reload for 300 blackout. I have Winchester 296 on hand, which is the same as Hodgdon H110. What other powders do I have on hand? Accurate 1680, a super popular 300 blackout powder. Slower than Winchester 748. I'm sorry, faster than Winchester 748. And another powder, IMR 4227. IMR 4227 is the powder you want. In short, this is what you're looking for. This is the powder for reloading this round. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Did everything I wanted to. This case, like we said, is unacceptable. I needed to get to, I wanted 100% case reliability, we'll say, when I went out for the first time with these. And that's what I've accomplished. I brought out, when I first did it, I was bringing out 100 rounds at a time, firing them, needed to get to 100%. Eventually got there with the IMR 4227. With the case folds that we talked about earlier, this is what you're going to have. You're going to have splits in the case when you fire them in the case neck. So you want to try to shy away from any of the cases. If you wind up with a fold in the case, just get rid of it. This case right here, you'll see no splits in the neck, no case failures. This case was the most dangerous of all cases. And it goes back to uniforming the primer pockets. A slam fire in an AK sucks big time. Each time it happened, most of the times that it happened, I've had plenty of them, it would push the bolt carrier group back, and my bolt carrier group would actually ride up above the rails that it was on, and it would get stuck and jammed. Slam fires are the most dangerous in an AK. Those case splits, these case splits were nothing. Although that looks super nasty, they were nothing. Alright, so now you know why you want to use once fired brass. why you want to get those primer pockets uniformed, and what powder to use. And pretty much whatever primer you want to use. Bullet selection. We're going to go through a few types of recommendations. One, the easiest one to find. This is the easiest one to find, but yet it is still somewhat hard to find. These are Hornady, we'll say seconds, that are sold through Midway. These are 60 grain. This is what they use in their Hornady Black line, and this is what they look like. They're VMAX bullet. Awesome bullet. 60 grains. They have the nice polymer tip. You can find them on sale, really, because not many people buy these. You can get them, I've seen them as low as just under 6 cents a piece. $5 and something cents for a whole box of 100. That's not bad. Remember, cost is one of the reasons why we're reloading for this round. Then I came across these. These are 60 grain pulls. There are companies that pull the bullets for the 5.45. One particular company that is awesome, not well known, High Tech Ammo. You're just going to have to Google them. These are 60 grain full metal jacket, boat tail. These are great. These work wonderful. 4 cents a piece. Remember, cost is what we're going for. Now we're getting into reloading type stuff where it's costing less than 223. All right, remember, cost is what we're looking for. Another option. You don't have to be in a jam to use this. This is a regular 223 bullet. A regular 223 bullet is sized to 224 outside diameter. What you can get is a Lee bullet swager, bullet sizer, sorry, that is sized for 221 bullets. So you can buy 223 bullets that are sized 224, put them up into your Lee bullet sizing die. This is what you're going to get. You're going to get the end result. It's going to look like one of these. This is your VMAX. This is your full metal jacket. This is what, again, this is what you might want to do in a pinch. These are only 55 grain bullets. You can get, I've shot, I guess the heaviest I shot was 75 grain VMAX bullets that I've sized down to 221. This is just a regular 55 grain sized down to 221. You'll see it comes nowhere near that Canalor. You're not getting much into the case with that, but it's good for in a pinch. And this one is just a nickel case. Has nothing to do with what I'm talking about right now. So now you got the case, why you're using that case, and why you're going to use IMR 4227 with the Winchester 748 case bulge. With accurate 1680, I've got, it wasn't 100% function, and it was a little, accurate 1680 makes a lot of gas, so it seemed it's just real concussive, sort of, when I was using accurate 1680, but it worked, not 100%. Then using the Winchester 296, that again worked also, but it was a little bit of a violent recoil. With the IMR 4227, I'm getting 100% we'll say reliability. The cases after firing them are coming out clean. With the other powders, I found that some of it was burning around the case, and the cases were getting a little discolored. Not that that's a problem, but the cases with the 4227 coming out nice and clean. They are going to expand a little bit in the chamber. We'll get into that. And the recoil felt really good. It was, even though this isn't a super violent round to begin with, it's, you know, people call it a pussycat round. This was even softer. This made it even softer with 100% reliability. It was great. Velocities, I'm not going for 7N6 velocity. My chronograph only works in meters per second, so just because it's a little busted. The readings I was getting with, we'll say, when I shot the Hornady VMAX, I was getting around like 850 meters per second. With the loads that I worked up with the 4227, I'm getting at like 750 meters per second. So it's not quite up there, but again, I'm not looking for, you can save your 7N6 ammo for, you know, the in case you need it time. This is just for screwing around, having fun. I'm going to shoot my dang AK, and I don't want to pay 25 cents a round to shoot. Man, I'm getting off on so many tangents. So those are your bullet options. Powder. Let's just stop talking. I'll load up. Oh man, I gotta put this thing together. Let me load up a few cases. Now I just have a Dillon 550. Nothing too special. Goes up. I have no dye or anything in the first position. All I'm doing is priming that piece of brass. And when you see it primed, you're going to notice that it is definitely below the case head. That's what you want. At minimum flush. I would say just get them down below the case head. All right. You want to prevent slam fires. That is the most dangerous when reloading. More dangerous, showed you, than those case failures. So that's all it's doing in the first step. The second step right now, it's getting powder. I have a little bit of powder in here. Seeing that primer. Now it's going into the third. Let's do one of each. All right, we'll start off with the VMAX. Now, because I use that chamfer tool when removing the shaved brass inside there, that's going to help in aiding, especially bullets like this, flat-based bullets. It's going to help in seating them. I have nothing in the fourth step. I was putting, and you can do it for the first time, I was putting a 223 crimp die into the fourth position. You can't do that in successive loads. After you fire these, they don't fit up into the die. So I just removed it completely. So there's nothing in the fourth stage. Here now we'll use the Full Metal Jacket. And these, since they're boat tail, they sit nice and easy when you're putting them in there. Rotate, and now we'll use the regular sized 223 bullet. That's them. Here's our 3 rounds. Full Metal Jacket. Super nice. Maximum overall length that we're allowed is 2.244, and we are at 2.235. Good. Excellent. Check the VMAX. Definitely over with the VMAX. Sort of okay because it comes to this point. And I'm pretty sure with this 55 grain we're going to be well below, which we are. We're fine. Those 3 rounds, fine. Bullet preference, sort of on you. Just make sure that they're sized correctly. 221. That's the outside. That's the outside that we're looking for. Diameter. Now we're going to go into firing them. Those are the cases. Man, is that is we are just about done. We're going to fire these cases. What's going to happen after you fire them? They're going to bulge in your rifle and look something like this. This is a decent example. You can barely tell there is a little bit of bulge down here in the case, right? It does that. This is called fire forming the case to your chamber. It expands. Now if it expands, what do you think is going to happen to the length of this brass? It's going to get shorter, which is why way back in the beginning we got this brass to its maximum SAAMI size, 1.555, right? We're real close to that, because when this gets fire formed, the brass shrinks. It's not shrinking; it's just going in different places. So the size of the brass gets down lower. So now we have our once fired brass. Leave the lubricant that was put on in the sizing, leave that on. Even when you're firing, just leave that lubricant on there. You don't need to take it off. I found that it helps out with the cleanliness of the brass. Like I said, using that 4227 powder, awesome, super clean. That comes out. Now when you get this back, you have a couple options what you want to do now, depending on how you reload. I like using the stainless steel tumbling cleaning stuff, so I'll decap these before I clean them. I just used a regular single stage press, so I'll decap it, then this will get thrown in the cleaner, and I'll have nice clean. It's once fired brass in my AK, but it was already fired once in an AR before, so I guess it technically be considered twice fired brass. But now it's sized to the chamber, even better. Another thing that I like to do is I have an annealing machine. After that first firing, I'll anneal all the necks. And I'll anneal all the necks so that there aren't any splits. Now this one is fully done over again. This one's ready to go again. This one was already fired. I annealed the neck, reloaded. Don't have to do the primer pocket uniforming. I already did that all in the first one. I have 200 rounds that are ready to go. Next time I go to the range, I'm just going to pop off another 200 rounds. You can reuse these as long as you're not getting crazy with your loads. What I mean is super high power loads. Like I said, I'm just trying to shoot my AK and have fun. As long as you're not getting crazy with your loads, the first thing that's going to wear out is the primer pocket. And that hasn't happened really until like the 7th, 8th, 9th firing. Alright? Now with that being said, every 3 firings, I'll put them back in the annealer just for the case neck. And anneal, I don't think you can anneal them too much. I could be wrong on that. You can do it after every firing if you want. I do it after every third. And the only thing that wears out is going to be the primer pockets, just like a regular 223 case. So now we're going to go all the way back to the beginning and talk about cost. If you have once fired Lake City brass, awesome. If you're able to get that cheaply or pick it up for free at the range, great. Your brass cost is 0. The only tool that I had to pick up that was sort of dedicated for this round, besides the dies, you're obviously going to need the dies, all right? Whatever round you're loading, you're going to need the dies. Is the one particular die, the intermediate die, that I cut and chopped down. That is the only dedicated thing that I bought, we'll say specifically for this round. So other than that, the brass, it's whatever you can get it for. If you want to buy it off, the Gunbroker or something, you buy loads of that, super cheap. Powder, cheap. I'm not going to get into exactly what load I use. Bullets, now that you know where you can get them, the nice ones, a little bit less than 6 cents a piece. The regular Full Metal Jacket ones, 4 cents a piece. Plus the primer, if you can get primers, I've seen primers as low as $20 for 1,000. So now you're talking 2 cents a piece. 2 cents for the primer, 4 cents for the head. Whatever the powder costs, a few cents there. You might be under 10 cents a round. Sound good? Is there anything else to talk about with this? Don't rush. Take your time. Have fun doing it. I use this. This is jumping back to one of the first steps. Sometimes that brass ring doesn't come out before I use the chamfer deburr tool after I size it in the 300 die, and I'll run this down the neck just to get that little chunk of brass out. It's just a little small brass ring that occurs when cutting the brass. And that is about it. If you want to screw around with 350 Legend brass, go ahead. I don't want to say it's a waste. It's still undersized, just as 223 cases are. The cheapest I've seen 350 Legend brass is about 25 cents a piece. Definitely way more than virtually free brass that you can pick up at the range. Thanks for watching this. If you have any questions, I guess just post them in the comments. Thanks.